one-time FCW Divas Champion, one-time Queen of FCW, ranked number 2 in the top 50 female wrestlers in the PWI Female 50 in 2014, three-time WWE Slammy Award winner, three-time WWE Divas Champion, the longest Divas Championship overall combined reign of 406 days, the second longest reigning continuous reign behind Nikki Bella. Ladies, gentlemen, my non-binary friends, today I'm talking about a woman that defined an era. A woman that planted seeds for what we see in women's wrestling today. A woman that was headlining the Divas division in a time when it was considered, quote-unquote, uncool to like women's wrestling. A woman that was adored by many, many, many people within the wrestling industry. My name is Josh Robinson and I am here for Love Wrestling, and today we are talking about the legacy of AJ Lee. When we talk about the Divas era of WWE, it's really hard to find a collective group of people that all agree on one thing, as with anything in professional wrestling. However, when it comes to certain divas standing out against the rest of the pack during this time of not really focusing on the wrestling part of women's wrestling, instead focusing on the eye candy and just little fluffy like diva segments, I don't really know how else to describe it. Now, I've talked about the diva stuff many times and my opinion on it and what I valued in it and what it may be, but collectively as a group, I'm pretty certain that most of us can come together and say that AJ Lee was a standout from that diva pack, and especially with her mic work and different things which I'll get to all in this video. But there was something different about her that just made her more relatable. She was more like the girl next door. She was more like, hey, we can see that girl walking down the street. She was one of us in a time when it was just 90% of the women's roster was models and very, very attractive women. Now, not that AJ Lee is not an attractive woman. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that she was one of us. She was more relatable. So there was many reasons why AJ Lee succeeded in the way that she did. Let's run some down and let's really deep dive here on the legacy of AJ Lee. So as I stated at the top of this video, AJ is a three-time WWE Divas Champion. Now you gotta remember that AJ Lee was only active in WWE on the main roster from 2010 to 2015. There is not really, that's 5 years that you're actively a main roster talent. Now, AJ really started to get her time in the spotlight in 2012 when she was storyline romantically involved with Daniel Bryan. We all know the story, and AJ became like the quote-unquote crazy chick. And in this time in 2012, you gotta remember, the image of a woman being the last thing you're seeing on Raw was nearly unheard of. It did not happen. In this storyline, AJ Lee was kind of in this love triangle between CM Punk, Kane, Daniel Bryan. There was multiple episodes of Raw in this time where AJ Lee was the last person you seen on screen. That is a big deal. That is a huge deal. That is a monstrous deal. There is so much in that you can just dissect and analyze, being like, that is a woman doing this in a time when women were not getting featured like they are in 2021. That just doesn't happen. Now, I know it wasn't like she was wrestling other women, and it wasn't like she was wrestling in matches. She was a character, but that's what the biggest, in my opinion, one of the biggest problems with maybe the outlook of the Divas division is that they were all just women. There was no character outside of the 2 or 3 that really had strong characters. AJ in this time was able to, yes, focus less on the in-ring stuff. We've seen her less in the ring. However, we've seen her more with a microphone. Women did not get this opportunity in these years. women did not get this opportunity to develop characters, to develop their mic skills. It's why AJ, I think, stood so far above the pack within this time. There really wasn't a lot of love for the other women because they weren't getting an opportunity to work on their microphone skills, to work on a character. I've said this so many times. The things I love about wrestling the most is, yes, I love great wrestling, but I'm a storytelling person. I'm an entertainment person in wrestling. If you're just a wrestler that wrestles, chances are I'm probably not going to love you. Now, I'm not saying wrestling is subjective and everyone's different, but if you have a great character, I'm more involved with you. I think that's kind of the way we look at things, is that wrestling is great, but we need great characters to actually care why this person is wrestling. So, long story short, AJ Lee is getting the opportunity to actually speak into a microphone. Now, fast forward throughout 2012 and into 2013, before we know it, we actually have a story that we care about for the WWE Divas Championship. Caitlyn was at that time, the reigning Divas champion, and she was going into this secret admirer kind of thing. Someone was sending her flowers and cards, and it was all something that you were just kind of like, at least it's something for the women. The women weren't really getting a lot of story at that time. Caitlyn come off a story with Eve Torres, and the women's division, the Divas division at the time, would kind of go through these peaks and valleys where they would get a little bit of attention and then nothing. There was no in between. We're finally getting something to sink our teeth into, and because of AJ's association with Dolph Ziggler, Big E, CM Punk, Daniel Bryan, Kane, she had some steam behind her and we actually had a reason to care. So of course it turns out everyone knows the story. I don't need to run down the actual ins and outs of this story, but AJ was revealed that she was playing mind games on her best friend, former best friend Caitlyn. That would lead to a fantastic match at Payback in 2013, and before you know it, AJ Lee starts this record-setting WWE Divas Championship reign in 2013. 295 days she held the reigns of the WWE Divas Championship, feuding of course with the Total Divas, which at the time I talked about in previous videos. The Total Divas was getting an audience from a casual standpoint, and AJ Lee was getting an audience from the wrestling fans to pay attention to the Divas, pay attention to the women. We had a balance here of casuals coming in from the E audience from Total Divas, and the actual wrestling, if you want to call them the internet fans or the marks, whatever you really want to call them, clashing here. And we actually had eyes on the women. We actually had someone we actually gave a damn about. That's what AJ Lee brought to the table. Now, of course, she would go on to lose the championship to Paige. Paige kind of took the reins for a little while. AJ and Paige kind of went back and forth with the WWE Divas Championship. Nikki Bella would get involved, and the rest is history. AJ Lee, of course, like I said, held the WWE Divas Championship 3 times for a combined reign of 406 days. The most of any woman with that championship, the most that any woman will actually have, because that championship, of course, is no longer existent. Now, she doesn't have the longest reigning continuous reign like Nikki Bella does, only by a few days, but I think her reign as WWE Divas Champion set something up for us. It set the pace for what we saw in the few years after AJ Lee left, with what women were really able to do in this business. AJ showed us that fans will care. If you invest in the time in these women, fans will care. AJ was a part of the initial Give Divas a Chance little run that they had when AJ, Paige, and the Bellas were feuding. She was a part of that, and of course she shortly retired just after WrestleMania 31. She is undefeated at WrestleMania, by the way. There's not a lot of people that can say that. Not even The Undertaker. So I'll just put that out there. Of course, I'm kidding, but AJ Lee is undefeated at WrestleMania. She did more for the WWE Divas than I think even we as fans will realize. I think there was a lot of fight that AJ did, being the way that she looked, being the way that she wrestled, being the way that she did anything. I feel like there was more to it than what we know. AJ, outside of the ring, is also a best-selling author with her books and everything else she does within the writing industry now. She's writing on a lot of television programs. She's wrote a lot of comics for the Glow series. She's done a lot outside of the ring. Wrestling is in her back door. Wrestling is her last chapter. She's in another chapter now. It's so cool to see someone do everything that you can do in an industry that you want to do in 5 years. In 5 years on the main roster. Of course, she was part of SCW and independent stuff, but in 5 years within the WWE spotlight, she has a Hall of Fame worthy career. AJ set the tone for what we see now with women just absolutely killing it on all fronts. Character, in-ring, time, everything. AJ was getting a lot of time that women were just not getting in that era. AJ Lee is a trailblazer for women in this industry, for women in mainstream wrestling, and for women that just are normal. There is more normal people than models. There is more normal people than jacked up, huge, incredibly athletic women in the world. AJ Lee is normal. I mean that with every bit of love and admiration. AJ Lee is one of us. She did more for women in this industry than we will ever know. I love AJ Lee. I love being able to talk about AJ Lee. I feel like she's a woman that just doesn't quite get enough praise for how much she actually did within the world of WWE. Of course, guys, as the norm, if you like this video, that big thumbs up button that you see just underneath this video, give it a click so I know that I'm doing a good job here on Love Wrestling. If you haven't already, click that big red subscribe button and click the bell so you're getting notifications of when new videos drop here on Love Wrestling. If you like AJ Lee or you have an opinion on anything I said in this video about AJ, leave a comment below and I'll interact with you. Love Wrestling will interact with you. If you want to follow me on Twitter, it's at JoshRobinson_00. Follow Love Wrestling on Twitter at LoveWrestlingCA. All of the links will be in the description for both me and Love Wrestling. Until next Monday, guys, I will see you on the next one. Peace out.